We are 100 days away from kickoff, and we tell you all about it on the BlueGoldSports.com podcast. What's going on, everybody? Wesley Shoemaker, joined by Aaron Parker, back with you today. We are officially 100 days away from kickoff. That means in 100 days from today, September 1st, 2022, West Virginia and Pitt will be kicking off at Heinz Field. Aaron, just another day in May today, but how are you feeling overall now that we are inching closer towards football season?
Oh, I feel great. So close, yet so far away. It seems like I can't believe we're down to 100 days. I went to the last Pitt matchup in 2011, and it just feels like the WVU Pitt rivalry hasn't really been a part of our lives as far as watching the game. So I'm so ready for it, and I think all Mountaineer Nation is too.
Yeah, being born in 2002, the last time West Virginia and Pitt played, I was 9 years old. I believe you were about the same. And this is the first time as a West Virginia follower, as someone who covers this team, as someone who kind of experiences this team, feels Pitt in a emotional sense, feels Pitt in a it's here sense. Obviously, I've heard the stories, I've heard the tragic tales, the happy tales. We won't say those numbers. Don't worry, folks. Not right now, at least. But yeah, big time for the Mountaineers, big time for Pitt too. Pitt coming off an ACC championship, Mountaineers coming off a middle of the road season, and both have a lot to prove. Pitt's going to try and prove that they are still capable of being one of the better teams in the ACC. Mountaineers are going to try and prove that Neil Brown's the guy and that they can hopefully win this game and propel that into a season of winning. So just starting off, Aaron, there's a ton of storylines to this game. Where do you want to get started? Just which storyline do you want to get started with?
Well, I think just the obvious one before we kind of dip into the players and team aspects is just this is an all-time college football rivalry that hasn't been played in a decade. And I think it's just good for college football to get this back. I don't mind it starting at Heinz Field as opposed to Morgantown, but it's good that they got the rivalry back going, but they also extended it to where there's going to be multiple years of WVU Pitt for years to come.
Yeah, just looking at some numbers real quick for those who don't know. Pitt leads the all-time series 61-40 with 3 ties in there. Last 10 games, however, WVU has pretty much owned Pitt with a 7-3 record. This will also be the first time that these two teams have played this early in the season since August 31st of 1996, where West Virginia did win on the road at Pitt 34-0. And I believe West Virginia is 3-2 all time against Pitt at Heinz Field. So some good karma, some good numbers going in, obviously the all-time series, but recently it's kind of been West Virginia being the big brother to the Panthers. Obviously a lot of recruiting battles, especially recently if you've been keeping up on Twitter, just looking at different things. There's so many different things to go into this game. And one of those that I'll start with is the quarterback play. It's not often that USC, the University of Southern California, kind of works their way into Northeast, Mid-Atlantic rivalry, but here we are 100 days away, and you have 2 quarterbacks and an offensive coordinator that used to be all grouped together at USC. Obviously, the big former 5-star quarterback JT Daniels is going to be under center for the Mountaineers this fall. And then for Pitt, you have another transfer, Kedon Slovis. And the best part about both these quarterbacks is that they were coached by Graham Harrell, West Virginia's current offensive coordinator at USC.
Yeah, it's a big storyline for sure. Those two guys are very talented, and Graham Harrell has proven to be a good offensive coach, and he can coach his quarterbacks, and he's got a system that he likes to abide by. I think it's what could have been at USC. It seemed like Clay Helton wasn't the guy as far as head coaches go. So there were some injuries, some other factors, and those guys went elsewhere. And I think it's what could have been a story for that team out west. But now you got JT Daniels on his third school, and you got Slovis trying to keep Pitt going after winning an ACC championship, but losing Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, and I think if you want to talk about Pitt losses, like obviously they lose Kenny Pickett, but they've also lost Jordan Addison, who was by many standards, one of the best wide receivers in the country last year, won the Blitnikoff Award for being the best wide receiver in the country. Obviously, a lot of times receivers are only as good as their quarterback play is. But still, you had a first-round quarterback and the Blitnikoff Award winner on your offense last year. Those two pieces are out the door. There's going to be a lot of question marks. Like, however many question marks are surrounding JT Daniels, there are just as many question marks surrounding Pitt's offense, and I think that bodes well for West Virginia as you get into these summer months and approach kickoff.
I agree, and I'm not sure how many other players Pitt has lost to the portal, but, as Mountaineer fans know, it's the transfer portal is crazy, and, you got to look at rosters year to year and not by a 2 or 3 or 4 year standpoint. So Pitt's lost some guys. They lost their main weapon, and I think that will give them a chip on their shoulder, but there is questions as far as JT Daniels goes, where he didn't really win the job there at Georgia. Stetson Bennett beat him out, but he's a talented guy. He's gone through some grueling injuries. I think he's going to be chomping at the bit to not only play but to prove himself in week 1 in front of everybody.
Yeah, obviously, as far as JT goes, I think you want a winner as a quarterback, and JT Daniels was 7-0 as the quarterback at Georgia. And although I think it's obvious, I think everyone in the world should recognize this. If you're not, I think you're a little bit crazy, but Georgia's talent level is a bit better than West Virginia's talent level, and those weren't the heart of the SEC games that he played. He kind of played early on. He did beat a Clemson team, though, did beat some of those guys. Like, he's played some games and he's won some games, but just watching his tape, it's going to be interesting to see how he adjusts to not having NFL wide receivers. At USC, he had NFL guys. At Georgia, he was surrounded as a whole team by NFL guys. So obviously West Virginia doesn't have all the talent in the world, but they're trying to build that. And I think if he can work this summer and he can elevate the play of others, this offense should be good to go come 9-1.
I agree. He's being coached by Graham Harrell. I think there's going to be an immediate click there. Just because they're familiar with each other, and Harrell is a former great quarterback himself, and he can still throw the ball as far as, just getting around in practice and showing mechanics and stuff like that. So I think there'll be a click there. And as far as the wide receivers go, they're not the talent of USC or Georgia or something like that, but there's some experience there with Bryce Ford-Wheaton. Bryce Ford-Wheaton's also about 6'3". He can go up and get the ball. Sam James has been with WVU since 2018. So I think there's some experience there. And as long as Sam James limits his drops, because he's had some problems with that over the years, I think that experience will go well when JT comes in and starts to get acquainted with those guys. But Caden Prather, he's super talented. I just a lot of people are acting like the wide receivers are the low spot on the team, and maybe they are, but I don't think they'll be bad.
I think if someone says the wide receivers are the lowest spot on the team, that's a good problem to have right now, because as we saw last year, Caden Prather, a lot of upside, another year of development. He's there. Bryce Ford-Wheaton, been there, done that. Sam James, been there, done that. Got a couple of JUCO guys that are coming in that, from all accounts, are very talented, can go catch the ball, can score. So you've got guys that have experience now, and I think another year of experience for Prather is big. I think he definitely has the skill set to be wide receiver 1 on this team, and who knows if Bryce Ford-Wheaton is going up and making one-handed grabs in the back of the end zone like he is against Iowa State, some attention is going to be turned his way, and that's going to give opportunities. And I just think with better quarterback play, with extremely better quarterback play than last year, and what should be between the difference between Jarrett Doege and JT Daniels, that the receivers should take a step up. And when you have a experienced offensive line, and when you have a running back room that is probably your deepest room on your team, possibly, I do think that sets the receivers up to, they don't have to make every play, because there's going to be a lot of times they're going to hand the ball off, or they're going to hit one of those running backs up for a screen. So as long as they can do what they are supposed to do and not try and do too much, I think that is best case scenario if you're Graham Harrell, if you're Neil Brown looking at this offense.
I agree. Don't try to do too much, but I think if Bryce Ford-Wheaton can step up and in the first maybe 2 to 3 games, or maybe against Pitt, command attention, go catch a few touchdowns, make a couple nice plays, get 100 yards in a game or something like that, I think defenses will turn their attention to him. And I wonder what the screen game will look like. You're going to have an experienced quarterback with Daniels, but I think Neil Brown said that he underutilized Reese Smith last year. Reese Smith is a pretty consistent ball catcher. So I'd like to see a little bit more targets for him. A guy like Preston Fox, I know he was a walk-on, but, he kind of proved himself to be able to catch the ball. Grayson Malashevich, those kind of guys. I wonder if they'll get any looks. And then I wonder what kind of play you'll get from the running backs as far as catching the ball out of the backfield, because while they didn't do it a ton, Letty Brown could catch the ball out of the backfield. So I wonder who that guy is going to be this year.
Yeah, you talk about going back to those three receivers real quick, Reese Smith, Grayson Malashevich, and Preston Fox. Like, those guys are all still really young if you're talking about in terms of development. And with all these, like, I want to put something into perspective here, is that there's some guys playing college football right now that would normally not be playing college football because they have an extra year due to COVID eligibility. So there's a lot of guys that are basically 23, 24 years old possibly, that are going up against these Preston Foxes, these Reese Smiths, these Grayson Malasheviches, who are fresh out of high school in the last couple of years. So, like, there's obviously the let's produce now, but there's also the, okay, if you look at it from a kind of a bigger picture standpoint, that these are guys that are continuing to develop, and we are seeing them develop, not just hearing about them developing. Like, we could hear Neil Brown talk about Preston Fox all we want, but we wouldn't believe him until we saw him do what he did in the spring game. So I think there's a good thing that we're seeing these guys develop, but there also has to be in the back of our minds, like, these guys are still so young and they still have so much more time to continue to get where they need to be.
Yeah, and as far as those three guys go, I think Malashevich and Fox have proved themselves to be able to get on the field. But with a new quarterback coming in, I have a feeling that Reese Smith is going to be that guy that every now and then, if it's 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, get that little slant pass, that little screen pass to number 15 and get 5 or 6 yards for a first down. I think Reese Smith will be that guy. I kind of hope he will. We didn't see much of him last year, but he's been there since 2019. So he's not as young as Fox. So I think maybe he'll get a little bit more share of targets. So I'll be interested to see what he does, and maybe catching the ball from the tight end position too. I mean, O'Loughlin's injured right now, but getting Polindi from Colorado State, he hasn't caught many balls in his career, but he's been working at it, and I wonder if they'll even target him in the first couple of games.
All right, pivoting back towards Pitt, just want to talk about kind of the betting lines here real quick, if you don't mind, Aaron. I'm just looking at it now. Things right now are favoring the Panthers. Pitt is pretty much a -7, -6.5, most places you look, and I'm not really sure if I agree with that. I think if Pitt was -3, -2.5 in that area, that would make more sense. This is not going to be a true home game for Pitt. It's not going to be a true road game for West Virginia. I think that there's so many factors, and I think giving Pitt 7 points this early I don't think it will hold. I bet it comes down, especially in the last couple of weeks towards kickoff. It comes down as the hype builds around JT Daniels, as the hype builds around this West Virginia team. And West Virginia's bottom of their offseason has already happened, I would say. I think it happened when you lost guys during spring football, when you lost Akeem Messidor, when you lost Josh Chandler-Samito. Pitt just in the last couple of weeks just had their bottom with their best player leaving. Like, he just said, I'm out of here. I don't want to be here anymore. And you can only assume that it's probably has to do with NIL, but I just think that it's good that West Virginia's trending in the up direction right now. And I think Pitt, if I had to give them a direction, it would be in the down direction right now.
I agree. And the betting odds, I do think they'll come down as far as that 7-point spread goes. We're still 100 days away from kickoff. It'll come down more towards the actual kickoff. But I think once JT Daniels gets on campus and, people kind of see his reps as far as practices go, see him in the gold and blue, I think the betting lines will go down a little bit, and especially towards kickoff. I think there'll be more hype. I think Pitt will lose a couple more players. I'm not sure about that, but I just predict that'll happen. And yeah, I don't think it's a true road game for the Mountaineers, so I think it'll come down, not to 7 points.
I just want to talk about – I have a question. I'll say it this way. If you're West Virginia, what do you think is worst case scenario and best case scenario. Obviously a win, but kind of expand upon that besides a win and a loss. Best case scenario, worst case scenario for the Mountaineers September 1st.
Well, besides just simply like losing, going there and losing, I'd say JT Daniels getting injured. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's torn his ACL. He's had shoulder problems throwing the ball. He's healthy now. He's with a winning program where he didn't really get the starting job. Had to watch the national championship from the sidelines. He's ready to play. So if he goes out there in week 1 and gets hurt, I think that's detrimental. You're looking at throwing out either, we don't even know, Will Crowder or, some people would want Nico Markio, but I don't think he's ready right now. Garrett Green, I don't know if he's proven to be that guy. So you're throwing out a guy in a crazy electric environment where he probably doesn't have much experience. So I think that's the worst case scenario. I'm not saying JT Daniels won't get hurt throughout the season, but if it's game 1, that's bad. That's worst case scenario.
Yeah, I think anyone getting hurt that's significant in their offense is bad, but I think JT Daniels, just because of what he brings to the table, is that it's that much more of a factor. Another question. We'll kind of keep track of this as we get closer to kickoff and just our guesses, but 68,400 is the capacity of Heinz Field, Aaron. On September 1st, 2022, how many of those 68,400 do you think are Mountaineer fans?
I'm going to go 55% WVU fans.
You're thinking that there's going to be more Mountaineer fans at Heinz Field than Pitt?
Yeah, I'm going to go as close to 50-50 as possible, which I've never really seen in person, is a road game being split 50-50. But, yeah, I'm going to go with it. It's 75 miles away. How many WVU alumni are working in Pittsburgh in the greater Pittsburgh area? So, yeah, I think it's going to be an easy trip. It's about who gets the tickets. Obviously, the season tickets will go to Pitt fans, Pitt faithful, and Pitt students. But I think Mountaineers will go to the secondary market and take up a lot of those tickets.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see this kind of atmosphere, just because we've been robbed of this rivalry, as we said in the open, for 10 years. And I just think that the way it's kind of happening and the way this buildup just keeps going and going and going, and from social media, I think that's a big thing too, is that you're seeing all this buildup on social media, and that wasn't there in 2011. You didn't have Twitter, fans going at it on Twitter. You didn't have guys posting hype videos. You didn't have all these teams tweeting back and forth at each other. Now you do, and I think that adds another layer to this. And another layer to this is that some fans, I think, will say, oh, the players don't care. Players don't know anything about this rivalry. And I just think that's not true. I know last year when West Virginia played Maryland and Virginia Tech, Neil Brown really took his time to educate his guys and educate his team on what this rivalry means. And I know I've just seeing on Twitter from Bryce Ford Wheaton recently, and he said, oh, trust me, we'll be ready. We'll know. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's good that the players are informed, but I don't want West Virginia to go out and feel like they have to change the last 10 years or the last 3 years of Neil Brown all in one game.
Yeah, I agree. And I disagree with people that say that it doesn't mean anything to the players. I could see where somebody would bring that up, where players are staying out of college for 1 year and then dipping. But a guy like Bryce Ford Wheaton, a guy like Sam James, they've been in this program for 3 or 4 years. I think Neil Brown and his staff does a good job of showing old games, showing old footage, showing old highlights and what this rivalry really means, especially for, 18, 19-year-olds coming into the program that are maybe out of state, maybe not even close to the eastern part of the United States, that don't really have a good sense of the rivalry. So I think I'd like to think Neil Brown and his staff have done a good job kind of showing what the Pitt rivalry means. So I think it does mean something to the players. And I think equally it would mean just as much to Pitt players as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that we kind of are seeing past is that there's two sides to this rivalry. Obviously, we cover West Virginia sports. We both go to WVU, so we see the West Virginia side of this rivalry first. But if you're Pitt, I think you say to yourselves, look, all time we are beating West Virginia by 21 games. Let's get it going on our home field. Let's hoist an ACC championship banner at our place. Let's turn a celebration, I think, into a win. And I think because they had such a good year last year that Pitt is probably thinking to themselves, I don't care who we lose. I don't care if we don't have Kenny Pickett, if we don't have Jordan Addison. I just think they think that, okay, it's not about who we don't have, just as many teams say, it's about who we do have. And if you're Pitt, you have to have some confidence after winning the ACC last year. Obviously, a pretty down year for the ACC. Clemson wasn't their best, their usual self, but there still is that thing, that factor of we just won a championship, although it's not a big championship. It's still a conference championship, something West Virginia has not done since joining the Big 12. They haven't even made it to the title game. So Pitt's been in the title game multiple times. They have a championship on their name as recently as last year, and I think that gives them confidence going into this game.
I think some confidence will be there, and you know, as far as Pitt fans go, I mean, yeah, you're winning the all-time series 61-40-3, but I think Pitt dominated the Mountaineers in that, you know, 1930s to, you know, 60s stretch or something like that. WVU 7-3 in the last 10 games, and I think over the last 20-25 games, I think it's in favor of the Mountaineers. So if you're a young adult Pitt fan, obviously watching Pitt beat WVU in like 07 to 08, you saw that, but you've witnessed probably more WVU wins. So I think they're ready to, you know, kind of come back after this 10 or 11 year streak of not playing WVU and, you know, lift the banner for the ACC championship. I'm sure they're going to be ready to break this little 3-game losing streak against the Mountaineers. Because if you're a young adult or an older Pitt fan, I mean, you remember the last 3 matchups. You know, 2009, Pitt was ranked in the top 10 and WVU won on a last-second field goal. 2010, WVU came into Heinz Field and beat Pitt very convincingly. In 2011, WVU beat Pitt by 1 point after coming back from 2 touchdowns. And Aaron Donald was on that team. So they haven't seen a Pitt win over WVU in quite a few years, so they're ready for it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the last 2 Pitt wins were in 07 and 08. I think all Mountaineer fans know of 07, know it pretty well, unfortunately. But yeah, I think this is a big game. I mean, obviously it's a big game, like duh, but it's means something more to both these programs than just what a Kansas would mean, or for Pitt what a Syracuse would mean. No, like it means more because it is more, and it will be more, and it will continue to be more because of the history, because of the tradition. And I think it being on a standalone Thursday night when the biggest game of that day besides West Virginia Pitt is Penn State at Purdue. So it's going to be there. The audience will be there for it in person, on television, the media, the hype, everything will be around it for it. And I just hope both teams deliver.
I do too. I think I will predict some chippiness early, maybe some scrums or whatever you want to call it. I mean, if you go back to the basketball season when WVU played Pitt in the Coliseum, there was multiple scrums, and you know, those teams didn't have anything to do with each other. Those teams didn't play each other. Those guys didn't like hate each other. They didn't have a rivalry feud going back years. So it's just because it's WVU Pitt that there was more on the line, a gold rush, that kind of atmosphere, that there turns out to be some chippiness in their first 5-10 minutes of the game. I predict the same thing for football, and maybe even more because you're out there actually being physical as opposed to, you know, hoisting up shots.
Yeah, I would not be surprised with a tight whistle at all, especially early on. I think the referees know they're humans. They know, they're going to be aware. And I just think it's more of a matter of them trying to keep the game in a safe place than trying to do anything else. So I would not be mad, and I would not be surprised to see an early whistle, but I think you're right. I think that these 2 teams, it's all about who can hit the other one in the mouth the hardest first, like who can get that first punch landed, settle in, and get going. And I think going back, just if you want to look at recent games, like this kind of has a 2018 feel, and how West Virginia was playing Tennessee, all the hype that built up, and then bam, West Virginia goes out. I remember Kenny Bigelow breaking through that line and just big play, first play of the game. And then like that was a big time performance in a game that I don't think many expected West Virginia to really show up, and the Mountaineers did show up. Obviously, not a neutral site. Obviously, this game is more on the line, but the way the hype is building, the way people are talking about it, even 100 days out, as we're saying, is similar to me to that 2018 game against Tennessee.
I agree. That was a great game to go to. I remember that Bigelow play like it was yesterday, but I think it's going to be even more. I mean, I think what will be similar is I remember the crowd, Tennessee, West Virginia being pretty split. I think there's more WV fans. I think that crowd will be kind of similar, maybe a little bit more Pitt fans than we're at Tennessee and Charlotte that year. But I think it's going to be more chippy. There wasn't much chippiness between the two teams, between Tennessee and WVU in 18. I think a big point to think about is sometimes Neil Brown's teams take some undisciplined penalties. Usually it's false starts and procedure penalties. But I want to make sure this WVU team, while they're excited, they're on the road, they're probably going to be wearing their road whites and all that. It's going to be exciting. I just want to make sure they're not getting hit and then hitting people and getting a 15-yard flag for it early in the game, because that could be pretty detrimental. As far as Neil Brown's teams go, you can't take bad penalties like that, especially not game one.
You talk about bad penalties, and I think kind of going back to that experience standpoint, that's where West Virginia has it. I think if you have a guy like JT Daniels who is cool, calm, collected, as we said, been there, done that, I think it starts with him. And if he can kind of be cool, collected, like, okay, they hit me late. All right, let's get back up, take the 15 yards, and move the ball down the field. And I think that kind of spreads throughout. Like, if they're going to hit you and they're going to get flagged for it, there's no need to hit them back. Like, just say, all right, I'll beat you on the field. There's no need to beat you after the whistle. I think teams that kind of do things after the whistle, it's because they, in the back of their mind, they think, oh, we can't beat you on the field, so we might as well try and get you now. And I think Neil Brown's going to have this team ready to go. Neil Brown's going to have his older guys, because if we're being honest, offensive line's old, defensive line's pretty old, quarterback's old, a couple wide receivers pretty old. Like, you have experience. I'd say the youngest part of this team's probably the secondary. So you have experience, and I think that experience will keep guys calm enough to not take the stupid penalties.
I agree on that offensive line. I don't see JT Daniels taking a stupid penalty. The line you got experience with Doug Nestor, Wyatt Milan played a lot last year. Zach Frazier, all those guys, Gamitter and all of them. I don't see them taking undisciplined penalties, but I want to make sure some of the younger guys, I hope Neil gets them, just make sure that they don't take those dumb penalties, because like a guy like maybe Mumu Ben Wahad, he's a freshman, probably 18, 19 years old. He'll probably be starting. You get that 5 yards of contact between the defensive back and the receiver. And if there's some shoving there, I just want to make sure that those guys are coached to just lay off, even though it's their first game, maybe their first game in ACC Big 12 play.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that just being smart, learning from the vets, talking to them, learning from your coach. And I think Neil Brown will probably have a message of, if you want to make dumb penalties, you'll be with me. And I think that'll go a long way. Transitioning to one more thing. Obviously, these will probably change, but predictions, 100 days away. Kind of give me a couple things that you're excited to see, a couple things that you're gonna look for, and then a very, 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 very early score prediction.
I am looking for early establishment with the offense. I think with the storyline of Slovis versus Daniels with Harrell and all that, you kind of expect these guys to be, running and gunning and throwing the ball downfield. I kind of tend to predict that one offense will struggle. I don't know which one it is. It could be either one. But with Harrell and Daniels, I kind of just see, I don't know. Part of me thinks that the offense will click, especially I've got a lot of confidence in that offensive line for WVU. But I'd be interested to see if that does turn out. I think one offense will struggle early, maybe not struggle the whole game. But I think one quarterback ends up with like a touchdown and a pick. And hopefully that's not Daniels. And, another storyline, just not taking dumb penalties. I got WVU, an early prediction, WVU winning by 13.
So what would your score be?
We'll go 33-20.
All right, I'm putting that in the notes, Aaron. So that will be there until we live on, until we do our final pit preview the week of the game.
That's locked in. That's locked in until September 1st.
Oh, that's your final. You're not changing. Okay, all right. I will probably change my score, maybe not my pick. We will see. But I think the one thing I'm going to look forward to offensively is how West Virginia develops the play-action pass. I know they've tried to do that in the past, but either not establishing the run enough, or not having the time to do it, or there's been so many factors that have limited West Virginia in the play action game. And I think JT Daniels, who has an absolute cannon, and you have a running back group who can run the ball and who can run the ball really well. And I think you have an experienced offensive line. And I think all those things and all those factors work together in trying to use the play action pass to your advantage. So that's what I think offensively I'm looking for. Defensively, I want to see the secondary be challenged. I want to see the secondary go out and be physical. Might take a penalty here or there, but I want to see them go after the ball, kind of use that speed. Neil Brown said they tried to get guys in who are fast, who can run sideline to sideline. And I'm excited to see, hopefully that speed translates into the game. As far as predictions go, I'm going to go Mountaineers 27, Pitt 21. I'm going to go 27-21 Mountaineers with the victory. September 1st, Backyard Brawl. And that's all I've got.
Yeah, that's all for me. 100 days away. I can't wait. I think it's going to be super entertaining, and it's going to be really fun seeing everybody try to squeeze into Pittsburgh at the same time.
Yeah, I think that tunnel might explode. They should probably just cut off the outbound traffic and just make everything inbound to Pitt if they're being smart, but that's not even logical. Anyways, that will do it. 100 days away, folks, from football season. Can't come soon enough. A couple other news storylines. West Virginia baseball is in the Big 12 tournament this week. Mountaineers are the number 6 seed, finished with a program best 14 Big 12 wins. Never got that many in program history. Mountaineers should be a safe lock almost at this point for the NCAA tournament, as long as they don't have 2 terrible games in Arlington. It is at Globe Life Park in Arlington, Texas, after being moved from Oklahoma City. So the Mountaineers will look to do something they've never done, and that is win the Big 12 tournament. So that is it for today, guys. Once again, 100 days till September 1st. If you made it this far, we do appreciate you listening. I'm Wesley Shoemaker, joined by Aaron Parker. This is the BlueGoldSports.com podcast.